And it's time now for American Scream. Fall of Perryville.
I was returning home after my coffee with Deirdre. So far, it was a fantastic morning. The air outside was brisk and carried the smell of fall, even though the leaves hadn't changed colours yet. My body felt limber and tight. I felt energised in a way I never had before. When I entered the house, I was immediately greeted by the sound of the TV. George was lying on the couch asleep as a commercial for some new medication played in front of him.
Feel like yourself again.
I grabbed the remote from off the coffee table and turned it off. I looked back at him lying there. He was such a handsome man even for his age. His hair was a faded gold colour, with hints of silver, and he had a strong chin and jawline that never seemed to quit, even underneath his deep-set wrinkles. His body was considerably muscular for a man pushing 78, and these features took me back to the California shores, where I had met him in '64. I always thought he was such a fantastic specimen, for both that place and time. It was a time so full of innocence and youth, a time that is even coming back into style with this younger generation. That's something I find funny about time. People will want to recreate it, but I actually lived in it. George turned his body to face me. His eyes opened and met my gaze, and he almost fell out of the couch by the side of me.
"Oh, sorry, honey,"
he said, grabbing his chest.
"I wasn't expecting you to be there. What time is it?"
I looked at my watch. It's 9:07.
"Really? What are you doing back so soon? You two usually spend a couple hours together."
I sat on the coffee table in front of him and crossed my legs. Deirdre got a call about something important, so I just decided to leave. I told her I might swing by a little later, though. He nodded and glanced at the remote next to him.
"Oh, I see. Hey, can you hand me that remote? I want to check the weather."
I picked it up and handed it to him. "I don't know why it would matter. It's not like you're going anywhere anytime soon." He looked at me and smiled.
"It's a bit early for that, don't you think?
It's looking like another cold one.
And as a matter of fact, I was planning on mowing the lawn today."
"You don't mean our lawn, do you?" He tilted his head back, annoyed.
"Well, what other lawn would I be mowing?"
"Our lawn was cut 2 days ago by the landscape company. You don't need to do it again."
"I don't like how they do the lines,"
he said while looking out the window. "You've got to be kidding me, George. I mean, if you're going to waste the energy, why don't you just use it on something you haven't done before? Why don't you go bird watching or something?"
"Bird watching? Really?"
I looked at him with his dulled eyes. I said, or something. Hell, hunt the birds for all I care. You're already watching the weather all day and yelling at the neighbors' kids for God knows why.
"They're riding their bikes in our driveway, Claire. I don't want us to be held responsible for when they fall and break their necks."
I laughed. "That is such a hunk of baloney, George. The worst injury our kids ever got from riding a bike was a scraped elbow. And nobody's going to sue us for that."
"You just wait and see."
This was his usual response when he had nothing better to say. When someone uses stupidity to end an argument, there's no real point in trying to find it with logic. I fell quiet, and he switched his gaze back to the TV. I got up and started to walk away, moving slowly into the study behind him. We had that room remodeled with wood paneling and coffered ceilings to add some elegance to the place. Built into the back wall were large bookshelves that ran from the ceiling to the floor. In front of it was an executive desk that matched the wood stain on the walls. I stood in the entrance of the room, just looking at that desk. It was a pretty unique piece that George had custom made. In addition to serving as a desk and storing important documents, it also served as a gun safe that housed 7 of my husband's most prized guns. How it worked was the 2 side panels would pop out like a door if you pressed on them. On the right side were 3 handguns lined from top to bottom, all of them revolvers. Inside the left panel were 4 shelves that housed the ammunition. The front panel would open up the same way as the others, but a hinge mechanism would carry it over the desk to reveal 4 rifles, each one being older than the last. He loved showing the desk off to his hunting friends. I'd often find him with the whole thing open, talking about which guns belonged to whatever general and whichever war. I pushed the right panel in and let go. The dark cherry wood bounced back to reveal the revolvers sitting there, loaded and waiting patiently. I grabbed the one in the middle. It was George's favourite. It was a big revolver, with a long barrel. Its name was the Judge. The gun felt heavy in my hands, and I walked back into the living room, standing enough in his line of view to get his attention.
What is it now?
I stayed silent and let his gaze lower to the gun in my hand. He got serious all of a sudden and turned the TV off.
What are you doing with that gun, Claire?
I'm not doing anything with it. I tossed it at him. He flinched as it landed in his lap. If you're ready to give up, then you might as well do it already. He looked down at the weapon and picked it up, and looked back at me.
You know I could call the cops on you for doing this kind of shit.
Go ahead and call them. I've got some things they want to hear about you. His eyebrows furrowed.
Like what? I've never done jack shit to you, baby.
You're right. You've never done anything to me. Stacy Fleckman, on the other hand, you sure as hell did something to her. He shook his head.
What? I don't know a Stacy Fleckman.
Oh, I know you don't. She doesn't know you either. You have me to thank for that. He still looked puzzled.
Claire, why are you acting like this?
I wasn't going to let him change the subject. I wasn't going to let him do this to me anymore. I took a seat in the armchair closest to the window. Do you remember when we had that yellow station wagon? I told you I wrecked it.
Yeah? What about it?
I was lying. You probably don't remember. The night before, we decided to go to a party your office was having. Little did I know you had a secret that night. A secret that I only found out about when we got back into the car and you started driving home. I guess that's when the booze really took over. Looking back on it now, I realize I should have said something. But at the time I figured, we didn't live too far away. And I wasn't exactly sober either. I remembered thinking we were lucky the roads were empty that night. But I soon learned that wasn't exactly true. Almost immediately after I had that thought, you swerved to the left, and there was a woman standing directly in front of us, placed there as if some higher power had it in for me. She turned around when she realized the headlights were directly on her. I can still remember how the impact felt, and what her body sounded like as it rolled over the car. It was so loud. We landed in a ditch, a ways in front of her. Of course, we weren't wearing our seatbelts. I ended up knocking my head on the dashboard and going unconscious for what was probably only a minute or two. When I woke up, I saw you lying on the wheel. The sound of the horn punctured my eardrums, and I quickly pulled you off while my ears continued to yell at me. That's not the part that haunts me, though. It was when I slid you into the passenger seat, drove the car out of the ditch to leave Stacy's body for dead. God, how it haunts me. I learned the next morning after I got the car crashed who she was. It was on all the TVs I walked past. She worked in the building next to yours as a receptionist. I also learned that she didn't die that night, but would be left paralyzed. I never told you because I knew you wouldn't be able to handle the guilt. I knew it'd be obvious to read on your face when you went into work the next day. But me, I could stay at home and go into panic while the kids were away at school. And when you all came back, I would pull myself together and act like nothing was wrong. Now I want you to feel it. I want it to crush you the same way that it's chipped me away bit by bit these last 50 years. Because if anyone could know what really happened to Stacy Fleckman that night, it deserves to be you. I could tell he was contemplating what he could from that night, and those strange days that followed. He was putting the pieces together and realizing just how perfectly they all fit. He exhaled heavily and picked up the gun that was now sitting on the armrest next to him. He held it in his hands and looked at me.
What are you going to tell the kids?
I got up from the chair and walked over to him, putting my hands on his golden hair. I'll say it was another diagnosis. That you didn't want to bring us through that again. He nodded, and tears fell from his eyes.
I'm sorry, Claire.
I gave him a kiss on his head. I still love you, George. I always have and I always will. He squeezed my hand and then let go. I left the room and opened the sliding door that led into the backyard. It was then that a thought popped into my head. I should invite the neighbors for supper. I've been feeling weird lately, like I'm in a dream or something. I told my mom about it, and she said it was just a side effect of the medication I was on for my tonsils. I had them removed last Friday. She told me it was the last day I was supposed to take the medication, and I should feel normal again by tomorrow. After I finished my breakfast, I decided to ride my bike around the park. Our neighborhood park isn't that big. I probably rode around the entire thing 8 times in the first 5 minutes. The park was empty now, but there was a lady sitting on a bench rocking her baby in a stroller when I got there. It wasn't until my 11th or 12th pass that I came across someone else on the sidewalk. It was an older lady. She had white hair and started waving at me when I was passing by. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? I stopped. Sure. She touched my hand and smiled at me. I live in that house over there, and I need help moving some boxes from one of my upstairs bedrooms into my garage. Now there's only about 5 boxes, but I can give you $10 per box if you'd be willing to help. That's $50 for the whole job. My mouth almost dropped to the ground. $50 to move 5 boxes? I was already thinking about using it to buy some more games for my PS5. Here, I can give you the money in advance. She pulled out a bunch of bills from her coat pocket and started counting them. I don't think it'd take you more than 5 minutes to do the job, and I'd really appreciate it. I just got a knee replaced, and it would be a death trap for me to do it. I thought about my dad and how he always told me to respect my elders. I figured if money wasn't reason enough, then that was just the nail in the coffin. That was another thing my dad said a lot. I told her yes, and she handed me the stack of cash. I got off my bike and followed her to the house in the distance. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell. I don't know what it is, but it's very distinct, and I always recognize it when I walk into an older person's house. She shut the door behind us and walked past me, entering the living room. You can go ahead upstairs. I just have to sit down for a second. It's the first room on the left, and you'll see the boxes right when you enter. Oh, and bring them through the door over there. It leads into the garage. Is there anywhere specific you want me to put them in there? I asked. Just anywhere you can find room for them. I'll be in here if you need me. The door to the first bedroom was open, and I walked in and saw the 2 stacks of black boxes sitting next to each other. I decided to start with the stack of 3. I lifted the first box off and started carrying it back towards the stairs. It was pretty heavy, but not so heavy that I couldn't lift it. As I was carrying the boxes downstairs, I thought about what the look on my parents' faces would be when I showed back up home with $50. I'm pretty sure they'd freak out. I reached the bottom of the stairs and went over to the garage door where I put the box back down on the ground to open the silver handle. At first glance, the room looked pretty tidy. The dim daylight was shining through the windows. On the other end of the garage, I could see things were organized on wooden shelves, with yard equipment hung up on racks. There was also a workbench to the right, but nothing seemed to be on it. I picked up the box again and stepped into the room. I thought I had taken a bigger step as the floor seemed to dip under me. I ended up losing my balance and falling over. I wasn't expecting my landing to be soft, given that the floor was cement, but it was. Was this the medication making me feel like this? Every time I moved, the room seemed to move along with me. I grabbed the floor and was able to pull it like some sort of rubber. A dark feeling came over me as I became dangerously confused. I turned back to the door, but it wasn't there anymore. My heart was about to tear through my chest because it was pounding so hard. I thought maybe I remembered the door in a different place, but the more I looked around me, the more I noticed that other things were starting to go away. At the same time, the walls and ceilings were closing in on me. Things became darker and darker, tighter and tighter. I was about to panic until I realized that it was all just a dream. I knew I was going to wake up soon. Knew I just had to get through the scary part first, and then I'd be lying in my bed again. I was now covered in blackness, and I realized that I wasn't waking up. This wasn't a dream. I saw this void wasn't completely black. I could see the faintest amount of light coming through it. Various shapes started to appear, and I saw that I was still in the garage. The rubbery material was pressing up against me. I was trying to push through it, but it wouldn't break. It only wrapped itself tighter around me until I couldn't move. I soon realized this thing was carrying me back into the house. It took me back into the living room where the old woman was waiting, with a big smile on her face. My eyes were wide, staring at the old lady. I was now right in front of her, and she started patting the rubber around me. Good boy. That's such a good boy. Her eyes met mine.